can share a PPT?
I've already started.
Okay. See, there will be some YouTube live on the top. That
Yes,
means,
I've seen that.
you start now.
I've in fact said okay to it. So in fact today we last time we started with the in MDI 003 we started with the this whole block is about Asian diaspora, and last unit or unit 23 which we did last week we did about the East Asian diaspora. So today we are talking about the South Asian diaspora. Domingos, can you see the PPT and hear my voice?
Yes, sir.
Okay, perfect. So let me quickly do a recap. I don't think so you were there last time. 60% of world's population lives in Asia, which is the World Population Review. And Asian region, largest diasporic population in the world. For example, the Africans, there was a very large portion of Africans who were taken out of Africa during the slave trade. But the point is, at that moment the national boundaries were not defined. So today a large part of the Black American or African American, Afro American people wouldn't be able to be classified into what diaspora would they become. So when they say that Asian region not only constitutes the largest diasporic population, I'm not sure whether they have accounted for that African diaspora in terms of the numbers. But however, Sahu 2021 makes this statement. And it's also a very diverse diaspora in terms of historical trajectories of immigration, spread, economic and political strength, religion, gender, sexual orientation, etc., etc. So that was Sahu. And East Asia is a geographical connotation referring to the subregion of China, Korea, Philippines, Japan, Vietnam, and others, which includes Thailand, Cambodia, Laos. Largest overseas population settled on a permanent. Now, the interesting part is when we are looking at Asians, South Asia is not considered Asians. In fact, a large part of South Asian in the West or the global North would be categorized as Indians or South Asians. They are not considered Asians. So large-scale immigration from East Asia took place after the end of Second World War. To Americas resulted from political. In fact, there was a Korean War. There was a Vietnamese War. 60s and 70s, the Vietnam War resulted in massive number of political refugees to USA, Brazil, Mexico, Canada, Japan, and China. So that's how the historical thing is. I'm doing a tie back so that whoever is seeing this PPT or going through the video is able to understand what we did in Unit 23. Summing up, we looked at in Unit 23, we looked at Chinese, Korean, Filipino, Japanese, Vietnamese diaspora formation, how they contributed economically and culturally, benefit their home economy through remittances, spreading of soft power, which today, again, this is what I have been speaking in various, units. The concept of diaspora and the advantages of diaspora is a very new phenomena by most nation states. In fact, earlier, most nation states considered diaspora to be a liability, to be those traitors who left their homeland. After globalization, connectivity using social media, and faster transportation, each nation state woke up to the fact that how these diaspora populations actually are a major strength. Let's now look at the objectives of Unit 24, which is about the South Asian diaspora. We'll do a little bit of history, engagement with homeland, and specifically about Afghanistan diaspora. And why Afghanistan? Afghanistan is a very unique country. If one is from an African would understand about ethnicity, Afghanistan is typically how the ethnicity trounces a nationality in a particular way. We'll look at it as we go along. So 7 South Asian countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, and Maldives. spread more than 100 countries, large-scale migration during colonization, better opportunity like study. So there was one which was before, which was partition of the Indian subcontinent, and then there was this migration in the 60s, and the whole type of migration was totally different. So I was able to get this picture from the net about migration from South Asia, how people have traveled, at various times, and a lot of people traveled from South Asia into Africa, especially Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, and from there into UK or US and Canada. There was a lot of movement between India and between South Asia and South Africa. There was a lot of movement between South Asia and Australia, Fiji. Fiji was the place where indentured labor went. Jamaica, Trinidad, Guyana, Suriname was where indentured labor had gone. So this map was a very interesting find. When I was searching on routes, South Asian had taken, I came across this map. Then, in terms of percentage GDP and remittances in 2021, this is how the various South Asian countries stand. India being the largest, which receives the largest remittances. In fact, India worldwide is receiving the largest remittances. Whereas if you see in percentage of GDP, Nepal, almost 24.8% of GDP is through remittance. And that's why when such a large component of GDP is out of remittance, any disruptions in the global political situation will majorly affect the country. So if you see, India, in spite of the 87 billion remittance, is only 3% of GDP. Whereas Nepal, Pakistan is in double digits. This is the 2021 estimate, which I got. Source is Ratha et al. So a little bit about the history. South Asia refers to people who are from the Indian subcontinent. Yes, Domingos.
Yes, sir. If India sends the large portion of remittance and how the contribution of GDP is so less.
Because remember, India's GDP is fairly high. India is now in the range of $3 trillion GDP. So, because of the large and a diverse nature of the country and its GDP, its huge GDP, the remittance are only a small percentage. Whereas countries like Nepal and Pakistan, the GDP, a large component of the GDP is coming through remittance. Domingos?
Okay, sir. So, okay.
So what? Ask, carry on.
Sometime also I hear about the Sri Lankan, Philippine.
Sorry?
About the Philippine also. I know that.
Philippine again has a very large percentage of GDP coming out of remittances. In fact, Philippines has made its policy in such a way that they were encouraging people to migrate so that they could run their remittances. You need to also understand in terms of what is the capability of the country in terms of manufacturing or tertiary sector. So, for example, India has a very large tertiary industry today. For example, BPOs, KPOs. There is a certain amount of manufacturing. A large amount of GDP comes out of agriculture. So, Nepal being a hilly state, possibly the amount of agriculture GDP or manufacturing GDP would not be as much higher. And that is why a large part of GDP is coming out of remittance. Domingos?
Got it, sir.
Okay. So you don't need to raise a hand. You can just, come inside and ask me the question.
Okay, sir.
So some of the earlier known South Asian settlers in North America were from regions of Punjab and Bengal. In fact, I was able to get a picture of Indian farm laborers in 1909 from an American digital archives, and which validated whatever I have been saying multiple times, that migration, the story of migration, or the story of human migration, has been a continuous story, and across history. In fact, before even industrialization, where there was a mass movement of goods and everything, there was always trade, there was always migration. So there were these people who were South Asians, were noted to be in United States since the 1700s. In fact, when we looked at East Asians, the Chinese were there when the US railroads were happening. And then people from Punjab and Bengal were there. A number of Muslim Bengali peddlers first arrived in New Orleans, where they later integrated with communities. Same time, migrants from Punjab, Sikh men made their way to west coast of Canada. In fact, Canada today has the largest Sikh population outside India. Almost 2% of population of Canada is Sikhs. And they have been historically migrating to Canada. So I was able to get this picture from American Digital Archives. And in fact, in 1917, US passed an immigration act which restricted migrants from the Asiatic Barred Zone. In fact, I got a map also about this Barred Zone. It was only in 23 when United States versus Bhagat Singh Thind, Supreme Court ruled the South Asians were ineligible from naturalization, preventing South Asian from gaining citizenship. So, there has been policies which were against South Asians in America. Then these cases, so this was the barred region. So if you see, these are the barred regions where people from here could not get naturalized in US, which were excluded from the United States with certain exceptions. So there was a certain amount of anti-South Asian policies which were practiced by USA. So I was able to map. The law would stand for the next 2 decades until Truman signed the 46 Lewis-Seller Act, which provided naturalization rights to both South Asians and Filipinos, but limited the number of migrants allowed into the country. So inevitably, with the coming of nation states, boundaries got, all these impediments got created, and yet people were migrating. The Immigration and Nationality Act of 65 abolished immigration quotas. So what started in 1917 was finally lifted in 65. Increase of migrants from South Asia forever changing the racial diagram. In fact, post 65, the migrants from South Asia, especially India, were doctors and engineers, were educated, people, technical people, and which changed the nature of, demography of US also. For members of South Asian diaspora, ethnic, religious, and cultural identity may serve as a conduit. South Asian inextricably linked to and shaped by 3 structural narrative: post-colonialism, racial and ethnic formation, and globalization. Globalization tended to, for example, when engineers in the 60s and the 70s, India did not have industries to absorb a lot of these guys, and they, for a better life, they emigrated to the US. So post-colonial theory have shown how dominant regimes of representation in colony, and how, representation, so they thought they were much better in terms of so for example, today also a whole lot of Indian diaspora feel they are much different from the other diaspora. How they represented themselves deeply influenced the way in which members of the colonial society imagine themselves in relationship to the others. In fact, for a very long time, the Indian diaspora considered themselves to be a model diaspora. They used to say that they are a model diaspora. Devastating impact of authorization on the colonized subject. So there was this thing about that they were different from other diasporas, which created different ways of adjusting with other people. Racial and ethnic formation maintains specific ethnic niches within hybrid and fiercely mixed societies, including Trinidad and Guyana. In fact, that led to a lot of political problems also. There was problems in terms of the Indian diaspora and the indigenous Fiji people. There were political problems. Indians in racially split national social frameworks. South Asian communities in Fiji, South Africa alternated, accepted and rejected the racial dominance. So they were negotiating tremendously. Indians arrived in England as lascars, sailors, traveled, followed the British Empire, and colonization also got this bridge between, let's say, India was colonized, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh was colonized by the British. So all these people then made a bridge to, go to Britain. Those who remained in London became targets of racial, social reforms initiative, racist social reforms. Trade, Indian diaspora, and multiculturalism are critical in the evolution of Indian society. Numerous indentured plantation and passage workers moved from India, and Indians today, because of the British, because of the during the course of colonization, traveled along with them as indentured labor. Uh, uh, Post-colonial periods saw an enormous shift in the kind of migration, because initially it was indentured labor, subsequently educated professionals moved around, moving from India, and there are globalization, free economy for a variety of reasons. In fact, uh, today again, in the last couple of years, a lot of Indians have left India and moved out. So there is this thing between old and new diaspora. The old diaspora was, the way the socioeconomic background was different, the education status was different, the manufactured sense of cultural continuity produced by imported Indian symbols and ritual made life. So, for example, when the indentured laborers were taken, there was no connectivity back home. They could not think of coming back home. There was no way of connecting back to the homeland, and that is why they carried their symbols and rituals. So in fact, a lot of diasporas, earlier diasporas, they would have certain rituals which would not be even prevalent in the homeland. For example, in India, there was a similar example of Africa, where people in El Salvador, African origin, had certain traditions which they carried on, which were no longer being practiced in the continent, in various countries of Africa. So that is how a cultural continuity happened. In fact, the history of South Asia is marked by centuries of movement, migration, resettlement, repositories of memories of homelands, often grounded in imaginary myths of unity. It is typically said that the Indian Americans are much more traditional than Indians in India. And I'm sure that would be typically the case of people from Pakistan, because India and Pakistan, partitioned to form two nations, and then there was a further partition with Bangladesh. Their earlier people would be much more traditional than what these countries, people in these countries are also in many ways marked by violent histories of some continents. So there was this major war in Sri Lanka. There was an ethnic conflict. India and Pakistan always have been, traditional rivals. It was, after the partition, there was this continuity of hostilities. Bangladesh was carved out of Pakistan. Nepal has been relatively quiet, but there was a Maoist insurgency in Nepal. Bhutan, by far, has been the quietest. Afghanistan has always been in turmoil since the last 2 decades. traumatic experience, making the past being constantly articulated. And the interesting part is the past has always been articulated in the present. When you look at South Asian diaspora through literature and films, it's a great way to figure out. So there were examples of these this person's haunting memory, Sri Lankan civil war trauma and diaspora, American author V.V. Ganeshan's novel Love Marriage, and French filmmakers Jacques Awkward, I don't know how to pronounce it, Finn Deepan, hailing from different cultural backgrounds. So again, it all depends on what perspective you are looking at from when you look at the diaspora. Argues that the novel and film functions as a trauma narrative. In fact, media becomes a great place where memories are stored. And those memories are then relived when one goes through media. One looks at news items, one looks at films, one looks at novels. Experiences are shared, trauma is emphasized. One of the reasons why nations cannot get together or continue because of past histories, for example, India and Pakistan and their history, possibly is not able to, and then films and literature keep reliving those memories. Memory remains a key aspect in the article. The Days of Plenty, images of first generation Malayali migrants in Arabian Gulf. Tina Camp's idea of quiet reading in the article. Kain Kurail investigates photographs of South Indian immigrants in Gulf. Media becomes a great repository of memories, and that is one of the reasons why human beings continue take photographs. And today, with a mobile phone, we are constantly recording memories, and then these memories keep coming back. Memory as a resource that not only allows us to recreate and reimagine the lived experience of early migrants through photographs, but also enables us to see the Gulf as a place of intertwined memories and aspiration. And that's not just Gulf, it's across the world. So today, for example, with globalization and the prevalence of internet, even when one person migrates, one looks at the media to see what's happening. In this complex space, migrants emerge as active negotiators of their place of destination. And each person looks at that media and interprets it in a different way, challenging the popular association of labor migration with ghettoization and despair. So some might look at it as ghettoization and despair, and some might look at it as an opportunity. So how people engage with media to take out their own unique perspective onto it. Religion has been a predominant factor in the subcontinent. Jains, for example, have been historically involved in numerous transnational trade networks. The internet and other forms have become an important arena to imagine, construct, and share the diasporic experience. So, and now the cultural symbolism and the cultural construct need not happen from the homeland. It can happen from the hostland and come back into the hostland. So there is a back and forth movement which is happening. Tyne Wykemans in the article Lost and Found, Center and Periphery Narrative of Jain Diasporic Experience Online. Data collected during fieldwork in Belgium, UK, US, and India, obviously where all Jains are settled. Jain diasporic experience and significance of religion in the diasporic space are constantly contested and in fact, that's what is happening with the diaspora. Everything is constantly contested and negotiated both online and offline. And today, because of the internet and social media, these negotiation and contestations have increased in frequency. Even though Jains living outside are considered as an important target audience about when content creator, Jain diaspora is, however, very active and engaged in producing digital content. So the content is not only being produced in homeland of Jains, which is India, but it's also produced by the diaspora. And because of these contestations and negotiations, a new form of religion gets evolved, which is the same with Hinduism, which is the same with Islam, which is the same with every religion which is there in the subcontinent. And religion, diaspora, and homeland are linked not only in terms of religious practices, but also in the political arena. And we can see, today, the hostilities between, for example, India and Pakistan then come out in UK after a cricket match which happens in Dubai. And it is everything which happens in the home then goes and plays out in the host land. And it's not just about South Asia today. Every single state is grappling with this nation state. Current rise of nationalist movement both in South Asia and abroad is in stark contrast with Europeans' multicultural dream. So at one point, the transnational habits allow a certain homogenization of the world culture. At the same time, it gets people into a very parochial way of looking at things. In fact, it becomes a backlash against multiculturalism, and all these negotiations are happening simultaneously. Yes, Domingos.
Yes. So what I see about the diasporic people, when they go abroad, they can assimilate everything, but about the religion, it's most difficult. Why it's difficult to assimilate the religion from the homeland? No, from the host land. We can see like Indians abroad, Hindus, or yes, when they go like US or European countries, many of those countries are Christians religions, but the Indians don't become Christians very easily. So what's the factor that contributes for this kind of
So
situation?
Domingos, it has to do with an identity formation. So more often than not, look at the fact. When you come from a particular country, there is a certain amount of socialization that you have gone through as you have grown up in your homeland. That socialization is in terms of a whole cultural construct. That what cultural construct includes your food habits, your dressing habits, your religion, your worldview. Everything is shaping, and this is making your larger identity. Now, also remember that this larger identity then gets you into a secure zone wherever you travel. So it's something like this. Wherever I would travel, there are certain things which would give me solace. For example, my food habits, or if I'm a religious person, my religiosity or my rituals, that gives me a certain solace and gives me security. And that is why most people who travel and move from one place to another, which could be inside the country or which could be outside the country, they hold on to those cultural symbolism which provides them security and solace. Now, it is something like this. You are used to a particular dressing type. Let's say a traditional African attire, which may not be the same as a Western attire of jeans and a t-shirt. Now, when you move, let's say, to the US, initially you are not comfortable in that particular attire because you cannot see yourself in that attire. So, religion, food habits, my cultural construct, everything falls into that. And then remember, God and religion fall into a much higher domain. Initially, for example, let me give you an example. Initially, for the Hindus, it was a crime to go beyond the oceans. There is a phrase about when you leave the homeland and cross the oceans, you lose your caste and your your larger identity.
Oh,
So
I didn't know this.
remember, it's a question of your identity.
Okay.
It is also the fact that somebody might be atheist but would not take anybody's religion. Now religion becomes a very personal to any person.
Yes.
Similarly, for example, the British were there in India for 200 years. I haven't yet come across any case where the British, converted into Hinduism or Islam, which were the predominant religions in the subcontinent. Because religion becomes a very personal, case, which is identity formation. And more
Yes.
often than not, a large majority of people are overtly religious, not covertly, overtly religious, and religion, religious symbols. So there was this case study of these young girls from an Indian village down south in Kerala who went to Germany for caregiving functions. They were taken, and the whole facility, or it was facilitated by the church. Now, here were these Kerala girls who spoke a local Malayalam language going into Germany without knowing German. Their only comfort was the church. That is the way they were able to find comfort. Then, subsequently, as they stayed in Germany, they were able to pick up German and carry on further. But their initial comfort was the church. So, religion becomes a great comfort area, and it's a very personal space. So, that is why changing religions is not a very simple thing, unless there is, major motivations which will get people to alter their lives, and then they will change religion. For example, in India, I can give you an example. In India, there is a lot of conversion which has happened or is happening based on possibly poverty. In fact, at a certain time, based on coercion, people change religion. So, again, every human being negotiates based on what he or she feels as advantageous in that particular situation. Domingos?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So it is to do
Noted.
with, so it
Because
is
sometimes sometimes it look very easy to change the maybe food habits, but religion is more difficult.
because religion, remember, it's a higher form. There is a certain mode of faith. Then there is a concept of a higher form of faith, which is God. In spite of the fact each religions talk about God Almighty being the same, and yet people, remember, there is a certain amount of being scared that if I do this, if I change my religion or I change my God, what might happen. It is to do with the whole identity of a person. That
Yes, sir.
identity gets shaken up.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, okay. So I came across this news item in CNBC by Sakshi. Brown Desi South Asian diaspora reflects on the terms that represent erasure. Now, again, as I said, people are able to pick and choose based on what is convenient for them. As an individual, as a race, as a community, what is so. For example, in the West, a lot of Bangladeshi and Pakistani restaurants are typically go by the as Indian curry, because India is a larger known entity in the West. So it's a negotiation. It's a contestation. It's a negotiation. How people in the Western world comes to view the community. North Indian culture is what people in the US are most familiar, and that has happened with Bollywood. The movies and the music, the butter chicken and the naan. So for the people from Bangladesh also and Pakistan also, it is much easier for them to sell themselves as Indian rather than trying and educate people about there. It's also a question of representation. Although they don't represent a majority of people in subcontinent, they are tropes many in the diaspora feel they have to conform to. For example, Bangladeshis in New York have been labeled the restaurants Indian. These are tropes, stereotypes which get formed. And that is why the South Asians are not considered Asians. It's a trope that has got formed. Many South Asians say they have no relationship at all to the term Asians or Asian Americans, don't get included and often not recognized as fully Asians. So fully Asians are typically the East Asians. So let's look at this unique country called Afghanistan, which is a part of South Asia. But if you see, I was able to get these photographs about the ethnic formations or ethnic groups in South Africa. This would be, if we were to pick up a map of the continent of Africa, I think you can color code in terms of the various ethnic tribes. So, in spite of the fact that Afghanistan is a nation, it is comprised of these ethnic groups because it is bordering countries like Iran, Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, and each country has a particular dominant tribe. So you see how many tribes are there, and the tribal loyalties are much stronger and bigger than the national loyalties. So let's look at the Afghanis diaspora. Collapse of Taliban has taken over recently in 2021. Millions were forced to leave Afghanistan for Pakistan, Iran, Tajikistan, Uzbekistan. 1,000 more evacuated to US, Canada, unprecedented in the modern history. In fact, Afghanistan over the last 2 decades, maybe more than 2 decades, last 3 decades has been constantly in turmoil. There has been, this collapse which has happened. The constructive and destructive role of Afghanistan diaspora. So from Asian Dispatches, a blog of Asian program, I was able to pick this. You can, search this, blog on the web, constructive and destructive role of Afghanistan diaspora. Group migration is not a new phenomena. Involuntary migration started with the Republic in 73. From the 80s onwards, Afghanistan has always been in turmoil. First, there was the Russian invasion, then the Taliban came in, then the Americans came in, and so on and so forth. Gaining back to the 20th century, Afghanistan has been in conflict for almost half a century, not 3 decades, half a century. 7 million people migrate abroad in period of less than 50 years. Left voluntary, but the rest have been, because of conflict, because of government collapse. Quasi-diasporic society does not reflect a unified diaspora because the ethnic, bonds are much stronger than the national bonds. It's rather a divided and compartmentalized diasporic society. Members lack a social form, do not fit a type of conscious, such as the same level of awareness, mental images, or see, again, it has to do with memories. How do I are able to recall my understanding of a nation? So, am I able to recall, for example, the memory of the nation of India, or the nation of Pakistan, or the nation of Bangladesh, or the nation of Afghanistan? Members of the Diasporic Society of Afghanistan do not deploy a uniform form of culture, tradition, and behavior. Unless there is a unified form, it becomes very difficult to recall because memory making is like such. Diaspora, especially, it's political. And then, of course, remember the diaspora, there has to be a political elite. They themselves represent ethno-sectarian Afghanistan. And we have also spoken about the fact in MDI 001, diaspora does not form immediately after migration. Just because people migrate does not mean a diaspora get forms. It takes time for and a specific reason why diaspora formation happens. And this diaspora mirrors the internal fragility of Afghanistan. Elites and intellectuals do not have a constructed relationship with the majority left behind in Afghanistan. And then there has to be a connection back home. If there is no connection back home, the diasporic formations are more, very fragile. Diasporic elites and people back in Afghanistan are challenging for sub-identities, sub-localities, and sub-politics. The politics itself is, ethnic. All political active members of diasporic communities represent the ethnic tribes. The ideology of political parties to which they belong. So unless there is a larger, a memory or a larger tie back to something bigger, a diasporic formation cannot happen. Has multiple perceptions of Afghanistan, though two are particularly common. One portrays Afghanistan as a beautiful homeland, the other depicts it as a place that is never easy to live in. Because of this half a century of political turmoil, falling of governments, external interventions, it is not a place to live in. Those who harbor the first perception believe Afghanistan has been a victim by predations of offensive and greedy hegemony past. And inevitably, today, the role of Pakistan, its immediate neighbor, has been a large component of Afghanistan. And the various governments which get formed, Pakistan comes first in perception. Hopeful perception of Pakistan believe it is a desirable place to live. They hope to return to Afghanistan. Ancient history, beautiful geography, and good-natured people. But because of the instability in the political realm, Afghanistan, these people can never hope to come back. So let's sum up. South Asian diaspora, 7 South Asian countries: Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, India, Maldives. South Asians are noted to have been in the United States in 1700. Larger presence starts late 1800. North America were from regions of Punjab and Bengal, linked to and shaped by 3 structural narratives: post-colonialism, racial and ethnic formations, and globalizations. Then I was able to pick up some, academic articles. So if you can take a screenshot or you can see it in the YouTube, then what I typically tell students is the fact that open a Google, separate window, search this out. A lot of these articles, full PDFs are available online. You can bookmark it to get further information. Struggles for identity formation, second generation South Asian diaspora overseas. In fact, identity becomes a key issue, how diaspora negotiates the complicated world of homeland and hostland. So there's a South Asian diaspora magazine of Routledge. Then there is Introduction South Asian Diaspora and Imaginary Homelands, Why Representation Still Matters. So for nascent countries like, for example, Pakistan and Bangladesh, how would the youngsters imagine their histories? Because more often than not, their histories converge with the Indian history. And that's why in their identity formation, it becomes how difficult it would be to, do their identity formation. So South Asian Diaspora is the magazine of Routledge. In fact, I picked up this article, South Asian feature films. Feature films becomes a great way to understand diasporas, especially if the feature films are made by diaspora, filmmakers. Diaspora films by, homeland people would not give the accurate perspective on diaspora feelings. So there is a Ponmani of Sri Lanka, Jago Hua Savera by Pakistan. It is a loose Bengali novel, Padma Nair, Nadir Majhi by Manik Bandyopadhyay, Lives of East Bengal Fishermen. So this was 59 when Bangladesh was East Pakistan. So actually, in the current scheme of things, this is a Bangladeshi movie. There is the Agra Haratil Kuzhutai. Again, I'm not able to pronounce it. It's a Tamil name. literally translates to a donkey in a Brahmin's village, a river called Titus, Bangladesh, 73. 73, Bangladesh was already there. So that is why it is said Bangladesh, Kanthil. This is a Sri Lankan civil war by Mani Ratnam, Reluctant Fundamentalist. This is a movie that I've seen. It's a Meera Nair movie. It's a beautiful movie. And then there is another movie called Namesake, a very famous movie again made by Meera Nair, based on a book by Jhumpa Lahiri. Now, Jhumpa Lahiri is an Indian diaspora. So this reflects Meera Nair also is an Indian diaspora. Namesake is the true representation of a diaspora as seen by the diaspora, and how identity negotiation happens. Then there are films by representatives of South Asian diaspora, Mira, Elephant Whisperers, Wedding Season, Joyland, Polite Societies. In fact, if you do a Google search and saying South Asian films or any diaspora films, that would be a great way to understand diaspora. Okay, there are some references and suggested readings, which is there in the SLM. One can go through it. There are more. I picked up 4. And I think we come to an end to this. Any questions? Let me switch on my video. Any questions? Domingo?
Domingo, any question?
Yes, sir. So I want to ask about this emerging direction of South Asian diaspora, in particular case about the globalization and
Emerging what?
about the trends and
Okay.
future direction of South Asian diaspora. Which kind of business are going down from this continent, from through other continents, helped and shaped by the globalizations and transnationalism. Which kind of business now they are going on from these people, and how diaspora people are helping South Asia development.
Okay, so let me restate whatever you are asking so that we are clear that I've understood what you're saying. So you're saying how is what is the shaping of the diasporas happening? How are things changing with the new diaspora? What kind of business are they indulging in, and how they are helping the South Asian homelands? Is that what you're asking?
Yes.
So, see, Domingos, traditionally remittances has been the traditional route of sending money back home, which helps families overcome their poverty and helps them achieve education, housing, etc., etc. Now, what has happened, for example, a lot of South Indian diaspora was traditionally moving to the Gulf. One of the aspects which is happening is a lot of the South Asian diaspora is instead moving to the West, the global North. In fact, a lot of diaspora today is moving to the global. See, again, one has to look at the fact that, and it's not South Asia, it is a generic case worldwide.
Yes.
The diasporas or people will migrate to places where they assume a better opportunity in terms of livelihood, in terms of life, etc., etc., etc. Now, more often than not, there is this again narrative, media narrative, which tends to say that people migrate from global south to global north. That is not the case. In fact, a lot of people from global south north migrate to global south because the cost of living in global south is much cheaper. So if I was to look at South Asia as a region, because of let's say Afghanistan being in turmoil, Pakistan, there is a lot of poverty in this area. There is not enough livelihood opportunities. For example, if you would have been reading the news item, there is a large unemployment in India, as is in other parts of Southeast Asia. People will migrate to get into livelihood wherever they are able to get livelihood. So now, and that also leads to other problems like human trafficking, smuggling, and so on and so forth. But more often than not, people are moving to get better livelihood. And once they move, they remit money to back home. And the second thing, they get their other family members to migrate to. What is also changing in terms of South Asia, India being the largest country, is the fact that a lot of Indian diaspora are looking to, and because of transnationalism, a lot of Indian diasporas are looking to set up businesses in India, though there is a whole lot of bureaucratic way in terms of policies and things which are not very conducive still. But there is a lot of interest because of transnationalism, because of better transportation, because of better communication. So we are currently going to have or having this Pravasi Bharatiya Divas, in terms of diasporas coming back, looking at how the country has changed. But today also we need to understand a lot of movement is happening in terms of transnationalism. So for example, a diaspora does not need to move back, but he's able to give resources to people out here in homeland to be able to access those resources wherever he or she is sitting. So for example, advancements in medical technology, for example, long distance medical knowledge gaining, or for example, sending business processing business or knowledge processing business back home, is also the way diasporas contribute to the country. Domingos?
Got it, sir.
So one major thing which has happened is the concept of transnationalism. So no longer is let's say an Indian or a Pakistani or a Bangladeshi looking only at home, but he is looking at setting up businesses wherever it is. Uh, for example, I was reading there is a lot of Gujarati businessmen in Mozambique.
Yes.
So, for example, and Gujarati has a major diaspora across the world, and Gujaratis have traditionally been business people. Now, if today conditions, and it's say, for example, if there is a political turmoil in one particular country, let's say Nigeria or Kenya, they would move shop, and they obviously, it's not just about South Asia. Every country is now looking at a transnational presence. Every individual, every community, and that is how it becomes. This is what has changed in terms of the new diasporas. Domingos?
Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. Any other question?
Yes, I want to question about the religion again.
About?
The religion.
Okay.
Yes, we know that those all countries of Short Asia, they don't have the same religion. So how this occur? Why they are all from South Asia, but the region is different? It's
Uh,
because of the British colony or some other colonies. I don't know.
no, Domingos, I couldn't understand. So, what you're talking about, region or
I was asking
religion?
about religion. Religion.
Religion.
Yeah, the religion of South Asian countries are not same.
So, for example, the major religions in South Asia is Hinduism, which is predominantly in India and Nepal. There is Islam in Pakistan, in Afghanistan, in Bangladesh. Bhutanese and Nepalese people are more Buddhist. Sri Lanka also has Buddhism, but Sri Lanka also has Christian. So, all major religions are there being practiced in South Asia. Now, interestingly, when South Asians migrate to North America, say for example, case study in UK, London, Brampton, and other places, most of the people from South Asia have a very bonhomie kind of relationships. In fact, the traditional rivalry between India and Pakistan does not carry over in the Western nations. But what has happened today is with this rising nationalism across the region in various countries, many a time these nationalistic tensions spill forward in the host nations. But we have seen, in fact, not in South Asia, but in other places also, when there are tensions, for example, between countries, look at the Arab world, look at I'm not sure about any examples in the African scheme of things. If there are tensions, say, for example, between South Sudan or North Sudan, it would possibly, spill over to the Sudanese diaspora in the world. Now, the interesting part is, irrespective of the religious differences and the fact that all major religions are representing or are present in the South Asian region, religion actually was never really a tension. Religion was used as political tool at various time frames and is still being used. But when these diasporas go out, I think the nationality becomes much more important than the religious underlines. Domingos?
Yes, sir.
So, take an example. The fact is, two African nations could have the same religion of Christianity, but their diasporas could have, tensions based on the between homeland issues. So religion becomes one of the markers of identity. It's not the only or it is a very important marker, but it is one of the important markers. There are other markers which come
Okay, sir.
in. Okay.
Yes.
Any other question?
No, sir. Thank you.
Okay. So you have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful week ahead. We'll meet next Saturday at 5 o'clock for MDI 001 Unit 3.
Thank you, sir.
Bye-bye then. Bye.
Okay, Abhay, take care.
Okay, bye-bye.
Okay.